So first up, we're going to have Helen talking to us about the process of building a finance plan. Then Trish is going to give us an example of a finance plan and talk us through it. And Sharon will talk to us about the producer offset. And then Victoria will do a presentation as well about her work. So I'll just hand over now to
Fantastic. Thank you. So I guess what I was thinking I'd do really quickly is a sort of a broad overview of how you make your finance, how you get your finance together. And so I'll just whiz through the preliminary steps, which are, 1, prepare the pitch documents. And part of that is researching the broadcasters, and it's really important to work out if you're doing television. I'm thinking in television because that's the area I work in predominantly. It's really important that you, in preparation for pulling your finance together, you have done your research on what the broadcasters want, what their slots are, what their audience is interested in seeing. One thing we do is try and test out ideas as quickly as possible with broadcasters to see if they're likely to be interested, and then we don't waste too much time developing things up if we think they're not going to be interested. That's sometimes tricky to do if you haven't got a relationship with them. One of the things I think it's good to mention to people who are up and coming is that it's often worth partnering informally up with a producer who has got that sort of relationship with a broadcaster, so that you can leverage, I love Trish's favourite word, off them and their relationship. So the other thing that's important before you start putting your finance in place is just thinking about who your key creative people are, because broadcasters and financiers want to know how they're going to sell your program before they commit to financing it. So you need to know if you've got actors, if you've got, I don't know, with the family law, we had Benjamin Law who had a good profile, so that was good for SBS. So you think about that sort of thing. The next step is to work out what you think it's going to cost to make this program. And that can be really hard, especially if you're not super experienced. I mean, the thing to do is to just try and get as much intel as you can, talking to funding bodies, talking to broadcasters maybe, although that's a bit trickier, talking to producers, and that's where the whole idea of having mentors comes in. You just got to create a bunch of mentors. And it's something I still do. I'll ring people all the time and say, we're thinking of doing this, how much, what do you reckon? How much do you think that sort of project is likely to cost if it's an area I'm not familiar with? For Matchbox, thinking about drama, we know that our drama series, Australian domestic drama series, not the big budget ones, tend to sit at around 1.1 million to 1.3 million an hour. And the half-hour kids series and comedy series tend to sit around the 400 to 500,000 a half-hour mark. So they're a bit cheaper, and part of the reason we have to make them more cheaply is because we can't raise the finance. You need to try and get some intel on how much you think you can raise. Then the next step obviously is presenting a compelling proposal to a broadcaster, because with television, having broadcaster interest is what kicks the whole financing off. Until you've got that, you can't do anything. So you've got to get them to say, yep, we like this idea. Ideally, you get them to, with drama, you get them to enter into development partnership with you, and you develop the project with them to the point where they're happy to commit to production. And with a drama series, often it'll be like you've got to have two first episode and second episode scripts that they're really happy with, and then they'll green light it for production. And that's the point at which you can then go and get your finance. So if it's a drama series and you're going to try and get money through Screen Australia, you know that you're going to get $440,000 an hour as a license fee, because Screen Australia specifies that the broadcast licence fee must be that much an hour, so you can put that into your finance plan. And you then you have to think about who else you're going to get to come on board for finance, and often it'll be one of the state funding bodies, such as Screen New South Wales or Screen Queensland, who are fantastic. You generally need a sales agent, and that may be two sales agents. It may be a different sales agent for domestic, i.e. Australia and New Zealand, and for rest of world. You have to then work out how much you can get from the producer offset, and I'm working mainly in the 20% space. So what I will always do when we're putting the finance plan together is also do a budget and work out what the QAPE expenditure is, and work out, generally we would cash flow 90% of the estimated producer offset return into the budget. So I sort of think of it as a jigsaw: finance plan, budget, QAPE spreadsheet, and there's a lot of sort of just playing with the money until you get it into a shape where you can finance it. And I think that's sort of my overview of the financing stages as a sort of a broad, high-level thing. There is a difference in shooting costs. I mean, New South Wales and Victoria are the most expensive states to shoot in. And you do, I mean, it's sort of a tricky one. We'll quite often think we'd really like to do something in Queensland, which is what we did with the series we've just had on air called Wanted. Originally, when we started developing it, it was set in New South Wales, and I said to our creative team, is there any way we can set this series in Queensland? And they went, sure. So we set it in Queensland. And that was partly because we hadn't done anything with Screen Queensland for quite a while. We'd done the family law, but we hadn't done a bigger drama series. And we really wanted to spread the love and do something in Queensland, and also because there are some great crew and locations in Queensland. So yeah, we think about that. The other thing we think about is you've got to be thinking about where you've got money from recently, and you don't want to exhaust that relationship.
Why is it cheaper?
Why is it cheaper? I guess Melbourne and Sydney location fees are really, really expensive, and also because they're quite congested cities, it can take a long time to get everywhere. So you're paying, you're moving your crew and your vehicles and all of that stuff. So that makes a big difference.